The morning I lifted the garage door and felt the ocean air roll in, I saw the HOA president pointing at my father's 1969 Firebird like it was a stolen crown, and for a second I honestly thought someone was filming a prank. Then I caught the slow creep of 2 patrol cars easing down our cul-de-sac, the blue lights off, but the posture all business. And Margot Finch, queen of Harbor Ridge, keeper of covenants and fines, was shouting to anyone with ears that the Firebird was hers, that she had a bill of sale, that I was a thief hiding in plain sight. I'm Cal Bennett, and if you had asked me 6 months ago what I do, I would have said I fix things: old engines, leaking roofs, busted fences, because that's what my dad taught me, to keep your hands busy and your words straighter than a spirit level. I never imagined I'd spend a summer learning the language of petty power, asset seizures, container codes, and the polite way very important people commit very ugly crimes. The Firebird wasn't just a car. It was the last project Dad and I laid out on the cracked concrete of that garage, a tangle of catalog pages and greasy shop rags, and a list on the wall that still said "Finish carb, adjust timing, seat belts," in his pencil scrawl. I kept that list just to hear his voice in my head. So when Margot waved a paper at the officers and announced that this vehicle belongs to Harbor Ridge Holdings, LLC, her lips almost smiling through the vowels, I saw Riley's eyes, my younger sister, go flat in that dangerous way she gets when something isn't right. An officer asked my name, asked for the title, and I handed over a folder that had been touched so often the edges were soft. He kept his voice calm, said, "Mr. Bennett, Ms. Finch presented a bill of sale recorded yesterday with the county. It lists this VIN." I knew exactly where this was headed. Paper beats memory every time, so I took a breath, popped the hood, and with hands that did not shake marked a greasy finger along the block where my dad, 30 years ago, had etched small and plain, RB 69. Some fathers put their initials on lunch pails. Mine stamped them into metal. The second officer leaned in, took a picture, and somewhere down the street a neighbor's wind chime rang like it was laughing at all of us. Margot didn't blink, she just pivoted, which is her gift, and said the etching proved nothing. People forge things, and also I was in violation of the community's no visible auto repair clause, and also she felt unsafe, and also the car needed to be impounded for verification. When people stack reasons like pancakes, it's because the first one is sliding around. I looked at Riley, who was already thumbing an email to a clerk at the recorder's office she knew from her job at a law firm. Riley is the kind of person who keeps names and dates and the dull facts that save your life one day, and I said, "That's fine. Tow it, but mark down the odometer, the carburetor model, the scar on the leather behind the driver's seat, and the fact that there's a missing trunk grommet on the right side I've been meaning to replace. I want to see all that again, untouched." The officers exchanged a glance, the kind people give a man who sounds a little too prepared, and I made another small choice I didn't advertise. I left a coin-sized tracker under the rear bumper. One of those little devices a neighbor's kid sells online for $70. The tow truck took my dad's car. The HOA sent an email blast about community standards, and over dinner Riley read out what she dug up. Margot had formed a new LLC 3 months earlier, was 3 90-day payments behind on her own house, and had been employed for a suspicious 2-year window by a nonprofit chaired by a city councilman named Victor Hale. I had met Hale once, at a ribbon cutting for a parklet no one used. He had the handshake of a man who practiced handshakes. The bill of sale was recorded by a junior title company with 1 desk and a printer in a strip mall, and the notary's signature looked like it had been done in a moving car. "Somebody wants your car," Riley said, "and they want you to fight on paper while they move it somewhere that paper can't find. If this sounds paranoid, live in a neighborhood with an HOA long enough and you'll learn. Sometimes the rules are fences, sometimes they are levers." A day later the tracker pinged, not at the impound lot, not at the police yard, but in a rectangle of warehouses out by the inlet where Harbor Ridge pretends our water view is pristine and not mostly cranes, and I drove out there with my neighbor Walter, tired postal inspector, eyes like a hawk, hands that still shake when he's mad because I trusted the way he says, "Let's just see." We didn't do anything you could call breaking and entering. We stood by a chain-link fence and watched a roll-up door breathe in and out like a sleepy mouth, and through that mouth came 3 cars, each under a dusty gray tarp, none of them mine. "Give it a few hours," Walt said. "Somebody's staging, and somebody's counting." When the tracker moved again at 3 in the morning, I called Riley, who called someone she knew at customs, who passed the word to a woman named Ava Durham who, it turns out, is exactly the kind of person you want when the polite game is over. She met us at a diner at 6, sat with her back to the wall, ordered black coffee, and let me talk until the whole mess lay between our plates. "We've been sniffing around that corridor for a while," she said. "Luxury goods, antiques, farm equipment, even HOAs and preservation committees are useful because they make paperwork heavy, and heavy paper lets dirty money move like it has shoes on." I told her about Margot's bill of sale, Victor's name on a nonprofit, the little LLC that bought abandoned items from non-compliant owners, and Ava drummed her fingers on the table and said, almost to herself, "Every town has a Victor, but only some of them get sloppy." I'll admit there was a moment when I started to doubt myself, when a voicemail landed on my phone from a number I didn't recognize, and Victor's voice slid out slick as oil. "Mr. Bennett, Victor Hale here. I'm just trying to de-escalate. I've heard you might be a touch obsessive about a car, and I want you to know there are programs to help folks like you part with objects in a way that honors their family reasonable. Cal, cars are for roads, not shrines." It wasn't what he said, it was what was underneath it. The confidence of a man who believes the stairs were built for him, who thinks he can persuade you that gravity is impolite. I listened twice, then a third time. Then I went out to the garage and sat on the cracked concrete and stared at the empty outline on the floor where the Firebird had rested, and I heard Dad's pencil on the wall list the little scratchy sound it makes when a man plans to finish something he never got to finish. We didn't pull a heist, we followed the ping. Ava's team watched the warehouse from a distance, then watched the lot closer to the port. A ship called the Camellia Star was listed to depart Sunday before sunrise, and on Friday night I stood with Walt on a bluff above the terminal, watching trucks line up like ants while the city slept and the inlet breathed fog back and forth. My tracker stopped at a lane marked C3, and my palms went hot in a way that told me I was not built for this kind of thing. "You're doing fine," Walt said. "You just care too much, which in this world is the same as being brave." Saturday, Margot tried a new trick, compliance inspection of my property for improper fencing and visible tools, and I met her on the porch armed with a stack of photographs from 10 years of HOA newsletters where half the board had lawnmowers out front or pop-up canopies on driveways. And I asked her, gently, why the rules were different when people liked you. "You're being dramatic," she snapped. "This is a legal matter now." I said, "So let's be legal." And I played Victor's voicemail on speaker, and for the first time since this started she lost her footing, just a little twitch at the corner of her mouth. The recognition that somebody upstairs had put his voice on record. "Cal," she said, lowering her volume, "you don't know who you're poking." "Lady," Walt muttered from behind the door, "neither do you." By the time Ava called and said, "Be on your porch at 5:30 Sunday, and keep your phone on," I hadn't slept more than an hour or two at a time, but there's a kind of clean wakefulness that hits you when something true is about to break. I stood there with coffee, watched the sky light softly behind the gums and pines, and when the phone buzzed I answered and heard engines moving in unison, human voices threaded through radios. A language of yes and go-aheads. "We're rolling," Ava said, and 10 minutes later, under a pale chalk of dawn, the terminal's lights flared and stood still, and then everything happened at once. Two unmarked trucks blocked lane C3, a crane froze mid-swing, and a woman in a windbreaker with her hair in a no-nonsense knot walked straight to a covered car and lifted the tarp clean like a magician ending a trick. Even from the bluff you could see the red paint, the black hood, the shape that had lived in my garage and in my head since I was 12. Walt let out a noise I've only heard once before, when he found a lost Christmas card with $50 taped inside and tracked down the sender 2 states away just to return it. People got arrested that morning. The driver with a clipboard that had manifests for antiques and personal effects. A skinny man with perfect hair who said he was just consulting. 3 dock workers who thought they were moving boxes and, to be fair, were. And an hour later, in a low, bland conference room that smelled like old coffee, I watched Margot walk in, pale and small, sit down, and start talking in a voice that tried on different shapes until one fit. She told Ava about asset consolidation, about motivated sellers who didn't know they were selling, about HOA votes engineered during holiday weeks, about how Victor had files divorces, liens, little mistakes on a dozen community leaders across the county, and how he kept them all compliant not with cash, but with a kind of smug gravity that made people fall in line. If you're waiting for a fistfight in a parking lot, I'm sorry it wasn't that kind of story. What satisfied me wasn't the click of handcuffs, it was the sound of a safe deposit box lid lifting on Monday, a box my father had rented under my mother's maiden name, where we found a thin envelope with photographs of Victor and a quality assurance report from their aerospace supplier days and a cassette tape labeled May 1996 meeting. The report documented how Victor had signed off on a faulty batch to keep a contract, and the tape, well, it was two men arguing in an office that sounded like a refrigerator, and one of them was my dad telling the other to do the right thing, and the other was Victor saying, "Don't be a Boy Scout, David, grown-ups run this town." Riley stood there listening with her hand over her mouth, and I realized I had been holding my shoulders like a man waiting for a blow for 30 years. In the weeks that followed, it felt like someone had shaken our town by the ankles. Names fell from pockets, stories spilled, and the ones who had always smiled too tightly started practicing new expressions. Victor took a plea. The phrases in the paper were thick and ugly: racketeering, conspiracy, wire fraud, and if you asked me whether justice was done, I would tell you this. My dad's name stopped being a rumor. It turned back into what it had been, just a man who tried, and that was a kind of justice I could live with. Margot, who had been a ringleader in a small pond, cooperated, cried on a live stream that became its own sideshow, and went away for a while. I hope she learns how to tell herself the truth. We voted out the whole board. We rewrote the bylaws with actual sunlight in them. We created a neighborhood council that can't foreclose on you because your trash can is 3 inches out of bounds. And on a bright Saturday in August, we held a small car show on the Greenbelt where the HOA used to post threatening signs. Kids ran between fenders and old men told stories, and I sat on a camp chair behind the Firebird watching the light move across the hood and felt, for once, like I wasn't on guard. I hung the pencil list back up in the garage, not because I needed to finish it, but because finishing is a kind of prayer. When I start the car now, I swear I can hear my dad clear as day saying, "Easy, just listen to it. It'll tell you." Every so often, late at night when Harbor Ridge is quiet in the way only a coastal town can be, with the wind moving through palm fronds and the water murmuring at the rocks, I think about the morning Margot pointed and lied, and I think about all the ways I could have lost the thing that anchored me to my Dayton impatient word to the officer, a broken temper, a belief that I had to fight loud to be heard, and I feel grateful for Riley's steady mind and Walt's old-school patience and Ava's cold, precise kind of mercy. And then I think about something else, something that keeps me from sleeping too easy. How many Victors are out there in towns just like ours? How many Margot-sized ambitions can be bent upward by one man's gravity? How often we call it procedure, when it's really just a new suit on the same old greed. So tell me what you think. Did we do right by playing it patient and keeping every step on the line? Or should I have taken the car back the night I saw it under that tarp? Do HOAs guard property values, or just train decent people to look the other way? And if your name were on a bill of sale you knew was a lie, would you fight in daylight or jump the fence at midnight? Drop your take in the comments. Share the story with someone who's been bruised by a petty tyrant. And tell me where you stand on this. Is justice the sentence, or is it the truth that finally has a name?